And we're here with Conor Ryan. Conor, what is up?
Evan, nothing much. What's going on with you?
Not much. You're still in Tahoe. You have not left.
I mean, there's worse places to be marooned for the past, 3.5 weeks. So, I'm hoping that maybe the snow will melt pretty soon. I can just kind of stay here year round. So I'll give you an update. But again, it's worse places to be, right?
There is. I think a lot of Bruins fans wish they were stuck in the Lake Tahoe times of the Bruins where killing the Flyers, where in the 90s retro stuff. Those were good times. That was because it's funny, up to that point they had a losing streak, or they hadn't won a bunch. But that game, I feel like it transformed the whole narrative around the Bruins. It was like, oh, this team's a wagon now. It was just one game.
No. Yep.
And I think even I left that game saying, man, there's a feeling about this Bruins team. Then they went on to lose a bunch and get killed by the Rangers. And they're up and down right now. They're facing a little bit of adversity. Obviously, Sunday night, they have that 1-0, terrible loss to the Devils. They beat the Caps before that. So there's a lot to take away. We'll cover a lot in this episode. I want to start here because I think that as the trade deadline slowly approaches, this storyline will really start to show itself. As we've said many times, both of us, we've said the Bruins don't really have a lot to trade in terms of prospects and guys on the team. You obviously don't, if you're competing, you don't want to trade your star guys. And typically you wouldn't want to trade a top 6 forward. But there is an exception this year with the Bruins, and it feels like Jake DeBrusk is someone who people are open to moving on from. 0 5-on-5 goals thus far. Not noticeable in many games. There's been a lot of games where you kind of forget that he's out there. You pointed this stat out to me initially. I wanted to update it because I think you put the stat out like a week and a half ago. But basically, Jake DeBrusk, among forwards with at least 200 minutes played this season, has an offensive zone percentage of 69.08%. That's 5th in the league. Basically, he's always in the O zone. So it's not like this. It's not like Sean Corrali, who I think has a 19% in the offensive zone. It's depressing. Like that's a really tough thing to mentally get up for. But 0 5-on-5 goals, always in the O zone, not doing much. I will ask the question: is it time to move on from Jake DeBrusk?
I mean, I think you have to view it in terms of the fact that you need to be realistic about if there's a legitimate trade return for him. You have to look at it. I'm kind of skeptical on what that would be. I think if this was a year, 2 years ago, when you wanted to trade DeBrusk, where he's a proven 20 goal scorer, potential 30 goal scorer, then I think you get something substantial from him. I don't know what his value is right now. I could see a team, wanting a guy like DeBrusk and, thinking that he could just need to change his scenery because he's a talented player. But just because they think that maybe he can thrive in another spot doesn't mean that they're going to give up a whole ransom for him now, because I think everyone knows his value's kind of never been lower than it is right now. So I think that's what you're going to have to weigh with the Bruins is, what are you legitimately going to get from him? Because I don't know if it's going to be a 1-for-1. If you want to get, we'll say like Ekholm or one of these guys, I don't think that's a 1-for-1 swap right now based on, the way he's playing. I mean, you said it, the amount of ozone reps they're getting with the production against it's killing the team right now. Like, we talk about Corrali and that fourth line struggling, and they have to tilt the ice better in their, in Boston's favor, but also like they're getting suffocated with these D zone draws. Like if you're gonna allocate all those ozone reps to DeBrusk, you better be getting something from it. And the fact that there's 0 5-on-5 goals, like you can't win like that. Like that's why I think that Sunday game was so discouraging, is because you come off that emotional win on Friday where not only is it great for the Bruins to stand up kind of in a against adversity in that situation, but you also had a lot of lines break through, right? Like the fourth line looked good with Studnicka. Krejci set up that goal to Ritchie. You felt like Coyle was playing better as of late, but you lose that game 1-0 on Sunday, and it's because the Bergeron line gets 17 shots on goal, but you really didn't get anything from anyone else. And we've talked about it many times, but how good this offense looks when Jake DeBrusk gets on a roll, right? Where he just makes something out of nothing or a bounce goes his way. You're just getting none of that right now. And I think Cassidy even mentioned it on Sunday, talking about it. It's like, it's one thing where, you could look at Jack Sanika in a situation like that, and like that guy has been due for like 4 goals in the last week, right? Like he's had so many
Yes.
grade A looks. Are you seeing those from DeBrusk right now? Like, and it's one of those things too where he's great, north-south skater, but is he intercepting pucks? Is he like forcing turnovers? Like you're just not seeing enough from him in the offensive zone, especially to warrant the amount of favorable ice they're giving him right now. So it's definitely concerning. Like I think you need to probably sit him for a couple of games just to cleanse the palate and reset. I think that's the first step, but it's a tough spot for the Bruins to be in because you need a guy like him to produce. And then if you want to trade him, you're kind of stuck in a tough spot because I'm sure they don't want to. I'm sure they still think he can be a talented scorer, but is it time to move on and see him succeed somewhere else? And if you trade him, what are you getting back? Because I don't think it's going to be he'd be maybe the headliner in a package, but he's not, I think, the guy that a few years ago, if you traded for, you would get, a lockdown top 4 guy for, a 1-for-1 swap. I don't think it's the case right now.
Well, the thing is with him, I mean, the high danger chances are low as well. Like he's not as you said, he's not getting to the dirty areas. A trademark of DeBrusk in past years was on the power play in the front of the net. He was always pretty good. He was good at fishing pucks out. Richie's better. And it's a good thing they have Richie there. Didn't think I'd be saying that this year. But I know what a narrative going into this year. If you thought that DeBrusk could be the guy in the doghouse, Richie would be the guy that everyone's clamoring over. Even though 5-on-5 Richie obviously is a different story. But yeah, the high danger chances are low. He's been put in good positions. They've tried him everywhere. They tried him with Bergeron and Marchand. They've tried him with Coyle, with Krejci. Nothing seems to be working. You mentioned an interesting point, which is obviously interesting in every trade, but I think in this one is especially important. What you're getting back, as you said, you're not going to DeBrusk for Ekholm 1-for-1. That is not happening. I think if it is a 1-for-1, it's struggling winger for struggling defenseman, struggling winger for struggling, forward as well. Like it could be a sort of swap of struggles, so to speak. If you're going to do a 1-for-1. Now, the thing is though, with an Ekholm deal, if that saves you from having to deal a first round pick, if somehow it does, then obviously I think you do it to get a guy like Ekholm. But I don't know if DeBrusk is worth or is equivalent to a first round pick right now. And I think that's concerning. That's not good because now it's like a stock. Back to stock talk. It's like when people would say trade Vakanainen this past offseason. What are you getting for Vakanainen? Now you'll get a lot more for DeBrusk. You'll get way more for Jake DeBrusk. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I don't like what would he get you? If you were to trade Jake DeBrusk straight up, is he worth a second round pick? Is he worth a top 9 forward? Like what is he right now?
Well, I think also an important thing to draw there is I think you look at a guy like DeBrusk and how you project him. And I think there's a difference between the want of, I think a lot of teams would love to have DeBrusk, but in terms of what for other teams it's advantageous, because I think a lot of teams want a guy like him, but they now know that they're not going to be put in a tough spot by the Bruins because his value shot, right? Like I think it's a ton of teams, I bet, where if Jake DeBrusk was on the market, you look at him, he's 24 years old, had 2 20-goal seasons, almost had 30 as a 22-year-old. You look at that and be like, all right, he's shooting 3.3%, like something's off here. But at worst, we can make him into a guy who's still a third line regular, a potential top 6 guy. He's going to give you at least 15 goals when we get him in a new situation. I'm sure a ton of teams would love to have a guy like him, but they also now know that like the value, it's not like the Bruins are going to be holding you over the coals for it. I'm sure they will. Like I don't think the Bruins are just going to give him up willingly. But I don't see it being a spot where like the Bruins have a whole lot of leverage here. Like I think they're probably more apt to probably just write it out now. Because unless it's in like a bigger package deal, if you're getting Ekholm and it's DeBrusk and a prospect, or I don't know if Palmieri, if that would be the ask, or if they wanted to like swing for the fences. Like I think we talk about Eichel as the most unrealistic, but like a realistic
for Eichel straight up.
Yeah, right. But if we talked about like what's like the most outlandish swing for the fences deal that like could happen, it would be like Ekholm and Forsberg or something like that, which would be obviously a huge package, right? But that's one where you would loop him in as at least a major chip back. But again, I think Nashville probably love to have a guy like DeBrusk, but the return has to be more guys, because DeBrusk by himself, the value just in terms of just looking at the production isn't helping out the Bruins in any regard right now, whether it's a trade or on ice production. It's not helping them.
What's funny is I think this offseason, DeBrusk might have been worth DeBrusk for Ekholm almost straight up. Like I think that would have maybe a third round pick thrown in or fourth rounder somewhere, but I think it would have worked. But now again, his value is much lower. I don't think they end up doing it. I have a weird feeling they probably won't. And they, I could actually see a guy, and this is not insider information. This is just my own feelings. I feel like a guy like, well, actually maybe not, because the depth on D, which we'll get to in a second. But a guy like Zaboral, I going into this season, I thought they were going to kind of pump his value up in good situations and then deal him off at the deadline for something maybe a little bit better. I also think the other thing is word around the league spreads kind of slow. If it's funny, when they pull the players every year, they say the best goalie is like Carey Price or something. Yeah. So maybe people around the league are like, oh, Jake DeBrusk, former 14th overall pick, scored the big goal against Toronto. Like this guy's clutch. He scores a lot. We'll give you Ekholm for DeBrusk. Maybe that's what happens. Maybe.
I mean, never a doubt like an NHL team for messing up the value. I mean, let's look at the Ryan O'Reilly trade, right? Like There's plenty of reasons for that. I'm sure even a team with a much more in-depth stats analytical department than what we have probably looks at his numbers and finds that, he's still in grade A ice a good amount of the time. Like it's system or players or just it's gone stale or just need to change the scenery. Like there's plenty of teams again who I think would love DeBrusk. It's just I don't know if the Bruins want to trade him, considering they're going to get probably pennies on the dollar for what his value could be. Because would you be surprised if he went anywhere and became a regular 20 goal scorer?
No, not at all.
It would remind me of, and that would be hilarious. I mean, it would like looking at a trade like that. It would be obviously dependent on what the return is, but that one just like gives me the same vibes as like Riley Smith, where like Riley Smith was maybe somewhat inconsistent a little bit, but the talent was there. There was potential there, and what do you know? He's such ripping it up in Vegas. I'm not saying he's going to be the next Riley Smith, but I could see that be one where it's all hinges on the return. But I still think he's got a solid career ahead of him. Like that, I think unless you're getting something crazy back, it's not worth it just to sell off a guy, even though he's been crushing them right now, especially at even strength scoring.
Well, the other comparable, now this trade worked out in the short term. Long term, you can kind of argue, I mean, Stanley Cup's a Stanley Cup, but the other one's Blake Wheeler, the Blake Wheeler deal. That's another one where, you had a young guy with promise, but you wanted to get an older veteran, more consistent, stable, third line presence. And you got that with Rich Peverley. Like Rich Peverley was a huge component of that cup winning team. He's actually, that's my name in EASHL. Like my own guy's name is just Rich Peverley. And it's, people are always like, what do you, Rich Peverley? And I'm like, oh, of course, Rich Peverley. What am I not going to have it be Rich Peverley? But yes, it's kind of similar to that. Obviously I think the Bruins would love to make a deal like that gets them a cup. But like you think about back in 2011, like could Blake Wheeler have stepped in on that second line and done what Peverley did? Probably not at the time. But again, Wheeler obviously has turned into a very good goal scorer. You can debate if he's a good captain or not. But anyways, that is the comparable. So I don't think they end up doing it. I really don't think they end up trading DeBrusk. Because as you said, I mean, you nailed it with that one. Like, can you see him being a consistent 20 goal scorer? Yeah, I can. I think most people can. The other thing is you mentioned the numbers that we have. There should be the 32nd or 33rd NHL team should be run by the media. I think the media should get a chance to run. It's like the fan NFL league where
that'd be the most dog shit team ever assembled if the media had.
Well, it depends on what side of the media. If it's like the younger analytics side of the media, you might be pretty good. But if you have like Don Cherry and
the people, the old people who would definitely have the say in what the actual moves were. Yeah,
that's true. Yes. Screwed. The old guard, so to speak. It would be, just be big guy. Milan Lucic should still be on the first line, and that would, I guess that would be the team.
Except they would take Adam Fox first, which would be a good pick. Granted. Yes. So
yes. You killed me with that tweet. That was a few weeks ago, but you the minute I sent that tweet, I was like, oh no, I forgot about Pierre. So that is DeBrusk. We will probably talk more about him as the weeks go along. That'll definitely be interesting to follow. Another thing, Brandon Carlo, you mentioned, obviously, the crazy game on Friday night where Brandon Carlo got his head smashed into the glass by Tom Wilson. all hell broke loose. Wilson got 7 games. Almost worse than a penalty was having to fight Tenorti, Frederick, have Patrice Bergeron come talk to you. Like, that's a weird,
stern talking to, yeah.
That's a weird thing when you're warming up and the most respected guy in the NHL comes over and is like, yo, like, what the hell was that?
Yeah. Which is funny that Ovechkin has now talked about how it wasn't a hit yet. He let another captain chew out his own player right in front of him, which is kind of funny how that. But I guess it wasn't a penalty. But that's just funny how the optics change based on what they did on the ice, based on what you'll say after a game. But interesting how that works out.
Here's my thing with the Laviolette comments, because if people don't know, Laviolette has stood up for Wilson a bunch, saying it wasn't dirty. You know, what are they going to take anything out of hockey? Now, I disagree with Laviolette completely, like absolutely 100%. He's wrong. However, he's also the coach of Tom Wilson. As a coach, you do have to have your guys back. You do. And, you know, you don't know if you come out and go, yeah, what he did was heinous and horrible and awful. You're pleasing everybody else, but you risk losing the room. And I think that, you know, again, I disagree with Laviolette, but it is his guy. So I'm not surprised that he came out and did that. That's probably the smart old timey coach thing to do. But I think the bigger issue at hand is, what are the Bruins like without Brandon Carlo? Now, Cassidy said on Sunday that Vakanainen and Zaboral are going to have to kind of shoulder some more responsibilities. Jared Tenorti is going to be getting more time. Connor Clifton. Are you confident in this?
It's not ideal to say the least, right? I mean, give them credit, and I think maybe it's another reason why that game on Sunday was so disappointing is the fact that I think the decor looked pretty good. You know, I think they did a good job. Not saying that, you know, the New Jersey Devils are like the late '90s avalanche of the Red Wings, right, in terms of their offense, but they still did a pretty good job. You know, I think Zborils looked pretty good the last couple of games, especially in terms of moving the puck. Obviously, McAvoy and Grzelcyk have been very good together. I think Tenorti's been pretty solid. There was that one kind of mini breakaway. There was a little bit of miscommunication between Clifton and Tenorti, but as a whole, I mean, he's doing his job, like, of what I think not even what we were expecting. I thought he was just going to be kind of a big body. Like, he's moving the puck well. He's doing what he needs to do. So far, they've been solid. But again, we can run into that situation where, you know, during this entire struggle where they haven't been able to string together these consecutive wins, you've had them either had the same old issue where there's no secondary scoring, which you saw on Sunday, or we've had a situation where it's like the last game against the Islanders, right, where they just got the wheels blown off because that defense was giving them so many chances. So, you know, maybe playing with fire is not the right term, but it's obviously not great, right? The situation right now, they need other help just to stabilize. And, you know, Kevin Miller, they hope he's going to be back by this week. But again, it's tough, not saying, you know, not an indictment on Kevin Miller's ability to, you know, play his role as a third pairing guy, but also, like, there's a lot of risk in that, you know, if the savior, or at least from the short term, on your decors guy that is taking a lot of punishment on that knee that is going to be monitored, like, that's just the way it is. There's a lot of risk in that. So it's not ideal. It stresses more that they need a top 4 guy. You hope that Carlo eventually comes back this season healthy, first and foremost, but it adds just another kind of hole to deal with, because you got a guy like Ekholm. Imagine he'd be with either Carlo or McAvoy and complete round of that top 4. But if Carlo's out long term, then you got a whole other vacancy that you can't feel very good about if you've got 4 weeks or so until the trade deadline to fix that situation. So it's not ideal in the slightest for the Bruins.
I mean, you look at it right now, the 4D who have injury issues: Grzelcyk, Lozon, Carlo, Miller. Zaboral had some issues as well. I mean, Grzelcyk, Lozon, Carlo is 3 of your top 4 from opening night. Kevin Miller is, you know, your net front clearing, defensive wizard kind of guy, good on penalty kills. Obviously, he's not in the top 4, but he's a big key component of that defense. He helps out. And you have those guys with legitimate injury issues. I mean, Miller's got his knee. Lozon has his hand. Grzelcyk has a bunch of different things, and Carlo now has his second concussion, because it was in 2017, right, when he got a concussion at the end of the regular season
from Ovechkin.
God love the Capitals, and you know, so he has a history of now head injuries, and that's not something that just disappears. Like that's not something like at least Lozon's. I don't mean at least like to, demean it, but it's it's a hand issue that can kind of just be fixed. That's a big issue. A head injury is a big issue. And Carlo is a huge part of your defense, and he is going forward. Tony Maz would rather keep him than Pasternak. But really, this does just show how much they need. I mean, they already got Tenorti, but if you can get another just guy who you can stick in there who's sound defensively, and a guy like Ekholm, like then you're set. But this just adds to more things. It adds to the shopping list that you need at the deadline, which doesn't help because the list was already a top 6 forward, hopefully, and a top 4 defenseman, which are not cheap. And now you need to go out and find someone else to add to the D. And again, like for your healthy guys, you have McAvoy, you have Tenorti, you have Clifton, you have Moore, you have Vakanainen. You're not going to run out of guys. You're not going to need Dave Ayers to come in and play defense. But do you want John Moore in the playoffs? Do you want Vakanainen having a consistent shift in the playoffs? Clifton's hot and cold. He's looked good this year, so credit to him. But how's Tenorti going to hold up long term? You don't know. So that's another thing they need. It's just another thing they need is guys on D. But again, Grzelcyk and McAvoy, I mean, if they could keep those two together, holy crap. And we said this all offseason, like they should be together. They should absolutely be together. And you just see the numbers that they're putting out. I mean, I know the chances were 22-9 in favor of them, 5-on-5 Sunday against the Devils. It was incredible against the Caps on Friday. So those two, if you can keep together, I mean, imagine a D pairing, a top 4 of Grzelcyk, McAvoy, Ekholm, Carlo. I mean, that would be
pretty good.
Insane. That you can get excited about that. You really can. You can get excited and that's good. That's better, probably better top 4 than you had even last year. So nonetheless, that is all the Bruins stuff for this week. I don't want to bog it down with too much negativity because I know people hate that. But we'll end on a high note of.
They got a game against the Islanders later today, so we'll see how they do. They've not had a fun time, especially down in Long Island. So maybe it's good to cut it off here.
0-3. But hey, they're 5-0 against the Flyers, and they do pretty well against the Caps. So they just can't face the Devils in the playoffs. And Kalman tweeted that don't worry, Bruins fans. The Sabres have a bunch of games against the Bruins have a bunch of games against the Sabres coming up. That's 16 points right there. I don't know about that. They're not putting these games away.
Look at the Red Wings last year, right? Like
exactly.
You can't go into I'm not to go into the cliche of it's the NHL, every team can win it, but they're not playing up to they're playing down with the competition right now, which is, you look at what the other alternate route is of regularly regularly scrapping for points against the Capitals and the Islanders and the Penguins, Flyers. It's not ideal. It's much easier just to pick on the few either rebuilding or rough teams out there, and they're not doing it right now. So we're going to be looking back on this, and I'm not saying it's full doom and gloom, but if we're, late April and they're right tied with 4 teams for those 5, with a couple of teams for those 4 spots, I'm like, well, those games against the Devils really could have helped you out quite a bit there. So, I mean, we're building up to a situation like that. So they need to start piling on these points.
Scott Wedgwood has the sword in the back of the Bruins.
Yes,
just like
exactly. Yep.
So yeah, Scott Wedgwood, just the new Vezina Trophy candidate.
Apparently,
it is funny though. Just before we go, I noticed this in the games where the energy kind of generates itself. Capitals, Flyers, the Tahoe. They mentioned the Capitals. The Tom Wilson stuff. Like they generated their own energy pretty much. In these games where there's no fans against the Devils, the Islanders, the more boring games. Mm-hmm. You see a different Bruins team. And I think that kind of that's where fans kind of come in, because again, like it was just like during the regular season, past regular seasons when you had those mid-season games against the Wild, who are good now. Congratulations, Spokesy. So hat tip to Spokesy on picking up on the Wild. Talk about investing in a stock early. But it's kind of those mid-season games against teams you play once or twice a year, or the boring teams where it's like you need the fans to sort of put a little oomph into you. And that's what the Bruins need right now with going against the Devils, the Islanders. They could definitely use that. But before we go, is there anything that you're working on at BSJ that people can go look forward to?
Yeah, we have a couple of features rolling out this week that I think we're excited to post and share with you guys. So if you want to follow all the content we roll out daily, it's over at bostonsportsjournal.com. So subscribe there. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do that at ConorRyan_93.
Go do all that. And for CLNS Media, I'm Evan Marinofsky. You Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest of your week.